Welcome back to Live from Paris. I'm Mark Owen. These are the main world news headlines. Tens of thousands turn out to protest against anti-Semitism in France. This on the same day that 80 Jewish graves have been desecrated in the east of the country. Karl Lagerfeld has died. Known as the Kaiser of the fashion world, Lagerfeld was the creative brains at the French brand Chanel and one of the leaders of the fashion industry of the last 3-4 decades. Bernie Sanders declares he's seeking the Democrat nomination for the 2020 US presidential campaign. Defeated last time out by Hillary Clinton, Sanders says he's running again on a democratic socialist agenda. Thank you very much for being with us. A mass gathering has been taking place here in Paris. Tens of thousands came to the iconic Place de la République to give their support to calls to stop anti-Semitism. The demonstration comes on the same day as an attack on Jewish graves in the east of France. Our reporter Catherine Norris-Trent sent this.
Saying there is no place for hate in France. Thousands of people had packed out this Place de la République here in the east of Paris, marking a protest against the rise of anti-Semitism in France. And other marches took place in 50 towns and cities across the country. It was a very calm, somber atmosphere, people holding up placards reading "Ça suffit," this is enough. And people I spoke to in the crowd telling me that they'd seen anti-Semitism on the rise for the past 15 or 20 years and that France now has to get to grips with it. Some people in the crowd were worried about this perhaps being taken over by political parties, because most of the major political parties in France had called for people to come to these demonstrations. But in the end, it was a non-political event, a non-political ceremony at any rate. There were school children from a Jewish school who were brought on stage to read poems. There was singing of La Marseillaise, the French national anthem, but there weren't any major addresses by the French Prime Minister or any of the members of the French government who'd come down here to protest alongside the people in Paris. And some of the people in the crowd told us they thought that was a bit of a shame, that perhaps the political classes in France could do more to make a point here, to take a stand against anti-Semitism.
Catherine Norris-Trent reporting a little earlier from the Place de la République, where the big demonstration took place. And on the same day, of course, Jewish graves were desecrated. Let's tell you more about that incident then. Between 80 and 100 Jewish graves were vandalized in the east of France. The French president went to the scene in Alsace, where he spoke with concerned local people. Now, this is the latest anti-Semitic attack in France, where such incidents are sadly on the rise. And last week, the Interior Minister condemned a shocking 74% rise in anti-Semitic incidents in France over the past year.
In these moments, when one of us is attacked, we are all attacked. I want to express my determination, along with the determination of others, to eradicate anti-Semitism in all its forms.
Emmanuel Macron, President of France, there condemning anti-Semitism. With the situation, sad as it is, 74% rise in anti-Semitic incidents in France over the past 12 months. Let's bring in for analysis of the situation, where we can go from here, how things can be improved. Glen, who's Director of ISGAP France. Glen, thank you very much for being with us. It's sad to say, but persecution of the Jews has been going on for thousands of years, which is horrific in itself. And it doesn't excuse what's happening today at all in any way. So where do we start with this problem and where do we start to address it?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's an ancient problem. In France, it goes back all the way to the Middle Ages, but there has been, as you said, a resurgence recently. It's very difficult to come up with solutions. I do believe that the fact that political representatives did not show up today at the rally is a bad sign, because that is one of the avenues that needs to be explored, which are laws and political statements and so on. But I think there are also other elements that get to the source of anti-Semitism, which we can discuss, that I think need to be improved in order to lower those numbers, which are really tragic. 74% increase since last year. That's around 541 incidents, and those are just reported incidents. Many of them go unreported as well.
It's all a disgrace, frankly. Glen, is it about people being jealous of Jewish people, this perception that Jewish people have more, have money, have more success? Is that what it's about? I mean, that in itself is anti-Semitic in making that assumption, I know. But is that where it all comes from, do you think?
I don't think it's an anti-Semitic assumption. I think what you're doing is you're looking at the reality. That is how people sometimes perceive Jews. It turns out in France, the reality is Jews are relatively middle class, but there is a sort of history that's repeating itself. And what I mean is that if you look at Germany in the late 1930s and you look at what was happening with the economy, which was stagnating and even in recession, Jews were used as a kind of scapegoat. They were perceived as being the wealthy bankers and so on, and they were, as a result, murdered. And we all know the history of World War II. So this, these patterns are repeating themselves. The Jew as the wealthy bourgeois or so on is a kind of trope that is reoccurring in France. There was a graffiti mark on a bagel store that said Juden in German with the kind of characteristic yellow that one sees in one saw in World War II. So these patterns are repeating themselves, and the Jew is, I believe, really this is being fueled by a kind of leftist rhetoric, which sees the Jew as kind of the bourgeois and the rest of the people as a kind of proletariat, which is very far from reality.
And indeed, I mean, and I can't say it any more stronger than it. It is absolutely despicable what's been going on. How can it be stopped? Is it purely about it is about education, isn't it? Because this all stems from ignorance.
A lot of it is. I think one of the main problems, we don't have exact statistics because of political reasons, the demographics are not officially observed. But we know that a lot of the anti-Semitic incidents, the vast majority, are coming from radical elements of the Muslim community. And I believe that one of the most important things, and it's a bit taboo, it's not something people like to talk about, but I think France needs to encourage reforms within that community, to have that community come together and really do some soul searching in order to weed out the radical elements. I also think there are certain provokers in France that mix some of the Islamist rhetoric with the far left rhetoric, and those include people like Dieudonné and Sorel, and these people need to be stopped. They need to be condemned in the strongest fashion for encouraging this type of racism, because that's what anti-Semitism is.
Indeed, legal action's been taken against the alleged comedian Dieudonné, as you say, but it hasn't stopped the problem, and clearly we saw what happened today in the east of France. Glen, we need to leave it there, but thank you, sir, for joining us. We appreciate your time. Glen Feder of ISGAP France, thank you for sharing your analysis with us here on France 24. We appreciate it. And of course, we'll keep you informed with all developments on the situation. That massive demonstration tonight at the Place de la République, and we're waiting to see what happens in coming days in terms of action by the government. Next, the king of haute couture, Karl Lagerfeld, has died. Tributes continue to come in to the designer best known for his association with the French iconic brand Chanel. His personal, exuberant sense of style reflected in the originality of his designs. Lagerfeld was 85 years old and still working till the very end. And no matter what your tastes for trends might be, Lagerfeld couldn't leave anyone feeling indifferent.
Tributes pour in for haute couture creator and fashion icon Karl Lagerfeld. The German designer passed away on Tuesday at 85 years old. It didn't take long for his fans to gather in front of Chanel's workshop and boutiques in Paris to pay their respects to the man and his work.
Karl Lagerfeld, he was sort of the messiah of fashion. He was like the big boss, the one who dictated everything.
It's hard to accept that he left us and Chanel so suddenly. It's like Chanel is collapsing, like the brand won't be able to recover.
The news sent a ripple of shock through London, where Winter Fashion Week is coming to a close.
I think someone like Karl Lagerfeld he has such an image about him. You don't really ever know how old he is. You sort of thought he just wasn't human. You thought he was just ageless. So the idea that he is mortal is shocking, yeah, it's really shocking.
For those who work in the fashion industry, Karl Lagerfeld was not only an icon in France, but all over the world.
He was famous in all the world, everywhere you go, because his work was fantastic. He did a fantastic job for Chanel, but also he has physique. Everybody can recognize him with the look.
Numerous fashion icons and celebrities, including Donatella Versace, Victoria Beckham, and actress Diane Kruger, paid tribute to Lagerfeld via their social media accounts.
I will never forget your kindness towards me, your laughs, your imagination. I came to France to see you this week and introduce you to my daughter. I'm heartbroken. I was too late. Rest in peace. I adore you.
The deputy artistic director of Chanel has been named as Karl Lagerfeld's successor.
Tributes then continue to come into Karl Lagerfeld, the man best known for his association with Chanel, perhaps, but of course a fashion icon who's passed away at the age of 85. The US Senator Bernie Sanders, self-styled Democratic Socialist, has announced that he's running again for the Democratic Party nomination. The next presidential elections in 2020. Sanders, of course, finished second to Hillary Clinton last time out. The Brooklyn native announcing his candidacy in an email to supporters, pledging to build a vast grassroots movement to confront the special interests that he said dominate government and politics in the US.
I'm Bernie Sanders. I'm running for president.
He's in for 2020. After months of speculation, Bernie Sanders has thrown his hat into the already crowded presidential ring, posting an official campaign video online and asking people to sign up to his movement. The 77-year-old senator from Vermont says he's not only running to oppose Donald Trump, whom he called the most dangerous president in US history, but to bring radical changes to America.
Our campaign is about transforming our country and creating a government based on the principles of economic, social, racial, and environmental justice.
Like Trump, the independent senator was a political outsider when he joined the 2016 Democratic presidential primaries, with many dismissing him as a fringe candidate. But he defied expectations with some major upsets, winning 23 primaries and caucuses against much better-funded Hillary Clinton. He galvanized a broad coalition with his anti-Wall Street rhetoric and talk of a political revolution. His campaign generated tension between the establishment and liberal wings within the Democratic Party.
The only way we create the change that we need is through a political revolution.
Sanders says he will push for many of the same progressive ideas he championed in 2016, including universal healthcare, free college tuition, and a $15 minimum wage. But he acknowledges he will have to run a very different campaign this time, as he faces other liberal progressives already in the race, like Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Bernie Sanders, the adventure begins. We'll keep track of all developments for you, of course, on everything to do with US politics. Now let's bring you some news of the football tonight. The action's all been in the Champions League, the greatest club show on earth, some call it. And 2 games in the last 16 have taken place, both finishing goalless. That doesn't mean to say they weren't good games. They're exciting. Well, the bits I saw were quite exciting, running to and from the studio. Lyon getting a 0-0 there. Barcelona will count that as a good result for them, I suppose, because they've got to take Lyon back to the Camp Nou for the second leg. And there you see Liverpool 0, Bayern Munich 0. Again, Liverpool, I saw early in the first half, could have scored through Sadio Mane, who'll count himself well. He'll be kicking himself, possibly literally, for missing what looked like a really clear chance to give Liverpool a lead there. And that finishing 0-0, Bayern Munich taking, well, the advantage back to the second leg, which takes place in Munich. We'll have a far more detailed telling of that story, of course, when Simon Harding joins us for sport in roughly half an hour. Can't wait. Now then, let's move on. China's Forbidden City opened its doors to the public for a rare night tour and light show this Tuesday. Thousands of people arrived for the first event of its kind in 94 years. Officially known as the Lantern Festival Night in the Forbidden City, the event takes place over 2 consecutive nights. And this Lantern Festival, what a remarkable sight it is, marks the end of the Chinese New Year celebrations. It is, of course, the Chinese Year of the Pig. Oink, oink, is all I say to that. And a fantastic scene, the Forbidden City. I was lucky enough to go there once. It is a remarkable place to visit. And these images really looking truly beautiful.